So, with the music going, the biggest news story of today is Apple announces their big virtual event for September 14th. And we knew that was coming, though. and it's also at the same, as usual, it's on a Tuesday in early September at 10 a.m. Pacific time, as is tradition. And what that means is it perfectly starts right as we finish the tech news around the world, not in this time zone, which we call the European morning time zone, but in our other time zone, which is the American morning time zone, as I call it, or the European afternoon time zone. So it will, when we meet in the other meeting time, we'll do our regular 3 hours, and then we'll start the live stream on Apple's annual iPhone keynote event. However, this year is a double whammy because it's not just the iPhone that's expected, but the new iWatch 7 is. The experts are saying that it's an almost certitude that they will reveal the new iWatch, and could even have earphone. The third generation AirPods might also be announced. Almost, and that's also the additional evidence is that they're naming the event California Streaming, and by calling it California Streaming, that if you follow these events over the past, many years, going back to their origins, they've historically always given hints in, like, by the name of the title or by the image, which they always announce, and they always have an invitation, and the invitation always has an image and always has some little Easter eggy type hint. And in this case, the title California Streaming is such a hint. And so it's causing all of the people who love to play this fun little game of what exactly they're going to announce. And clearly the title plays into it in this case. So what kind of streaming thing might we expect from Apple? We don't know. But no doubt that is putting a lot of the Apple geeks on a fun little chase to figure out what kind of streaming stuff will be announced next Tuesday. So we'll.
I think it's going to relate to Apple TV, Tyler.
Oh, could be. Yeah.
Would it also relate anything to do with MacBook Pro, or is that been already decided?
Yeah, great question. You're right, Professor Ossoff. It is also expected that the MacBook Pro 14-inch and 16-inch are very likely to be addressed, because timing-wise, it should be about now that they announced the MacBook Pro 14 and 16 with the M1X processor. I myself am that more than the phone or the watch. That would be kind of
ditto.
Yeah.
This is a two event season. It's, they did this, I think, in 2012 when the iPad mini came out.
Mm-hmm.
They had so much in their pipeline, they had to split it into two events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but why I call it streaming?
They could pull it off if there was AR.
Tyler, 3 days after this event, which is September 17th,
yes,
is going to be the beginning of the second season of the morning show on Apple TV, which is probably one of the bigger shows. That's
Well done, Ken. That's a great point. Apple is starting a new show. Would they call it the Apple Morning Show?
No, it's not a new show. It's the second season of the morning show with Jennifer Aniston, which is probably the biggest hit they had on Apple TV.
Right.
Because Apple TV is way behind Netflix, and Amazon Prime. So
you mean the Apple TV they can't give away for free when you go to Kroger or Target or?
Well, I don't mean the device. I'm talking about the streaming service.
The streaming, yeah. I'm an Apple fan, and I don't spend a penny on Apple TV. Yeah,
they definitely need to do more work on the content side of things. It's just maybe it's just hard for them to differentiate them, and Netflix is so singularly focused on that mission, and that. But Disney managed it. But Disney's a media company, and it's
the cross-platform. I think Apple.
Oh, that too.
Is Apple TV on Android?
Great point.
Yeah, so it's that.
Same with Apple Music. Always struggled, and Spotify just
We love Apple Music. I don't live without it, but
yeah,
all my Android friends don't use it.
right.
But, I don't know the details. I'm going to have to look this up. But a good friend of mine in New York, before Disney streaming launched, she kind of hinted to me about this project that she was working on. So I feel like Disney may have outsourced its streaming, but I just need to follow up with her and, and get more details around it. So it could be that Apple's trying to keep everything in house, whereas a company like Disney, which is so diversified across media and other channels, maybe they have outsourced parts of their operations.
Plus, I think it's Disney has a real strong incentive to keep the economic engine running on their content library in a way that Apple just doesn't. This is not critical to Apple's success, that they succeed with Apple TV or Apple Music in the same way that it is like with Disney digitizing their content library.
Well, nothing more evidence of that, the fact that they've been investing in the blockchain and trying to use that, Disney I'm talking about, trying to use that to lock down all of their content distribution networks.
Oh, interesting.
Well, and Disney owns its own content, right? So they own ESPN and ABC, and so they have television shows and sports shows and films and movies that are already in the hopper, whereas Apple TV just doesn't have its own, it doesn't produce its own content in the same way that Disney does.
I think Apple will focus on health, as is Google. And I just was speaking to someone yesterday in London, and Google are building a building which is like the building in London now. It's got everything under the sun near King's Cross, and it's close to the Crick Institute, and everyone wants to be next to that building.
So on that note, there is a headline coming up that SpaceX is going to use Apple hardware to test astronauts' health and stuff like that. I don't have the headline. I have 50 tabs open, so I have to find it. But that teases that point pretty well. That if Apple's going, working with SpaceX on that, there's certainly something there, and it's interesting. What it seems, I could be wrong. This is my own little conspiracy. If it weren't for the big crackdown that's now underway on the big tech companies, it seemed like Amazon and Apple and Google and Amazon, they were all rushing into medtech in a very, very big way. And now that this big crackdown's happening, they're intentionally trying to minimize the appearance of their march into medtech, because they don't want to spook that medtech industry, which is very powerful politically and could likely, get them, regulated out of that industry in a way. So I think they have to be very cagey about what their real ambitions are. And we saw that with Google recently. They're saying, oh, we're winding down Google Health. Google Health doesn't exist anymore, and we're going to diversify it into our existing properties in the Google. It's just really peculiar behaviors happening in the
So Tyler,
yeah.
to this point, I'm gonna try to work with Heyman to get a really good guest on, to give us a really top-down view of healthcare in America, how it works, down to the mechanics of how Disney and Amazon and Walmart really flex their muscles as big corporate entities to, secure their supply chain for healthcare, so to speak. So I think it'd be informative to explain some of the challenges there, but the core of it is data is warfare in medicine. The companies use it all the time to fight each other at the cost of the patients. Basically, they have to go get tests again when the data comes over in faxes. and so basically that's what happens is you switch healthcare providers and you need to get all your data over to a new provider, and what they do is they say, well, guess what, here's the 10,000 faxes that your new healthcare provider needs to now process and determine and read bad handwriting to get into a computer system. And when you're on the other side, you're like, this is shit. I can't do anything with this. I'm just going to send my customer through the diagnostic process again. So, you may have done your labs last year to get all lined up. Well, you're going to have to do them again. And it doesn't matter to the other side because they've won you as a customer now. And so that's why I think that's what the big data is realizing, is that there's a lot of really dirty games being played in there that make it not as straightforward as the fields they're used to. And I'll shut up now.
So the Benedict Evans, who used to be at Andreessen Horowitz, who's a rather clever geek with a huge email list, in this whole Apple speculation game based on the image that was released and the title California Dreaming, he says on Twitter about this, if I did this kind of speculation, I would say this is a perfect video, because there was a little video that was released. He says this is a perfect video to tease AR and VR, although there's no particular indication that any such product is that close. Which he's right. They obviously are working on it. The question is, when will they release it? And he is right. There are you could look at the content that was released yesterday and extrapolate that they might be teasing AR and VR, but he's right. It seems like it's too early. It might be too early for it still.
So Tyler, have you done the VR? Have you done the Easter egg yet?
Which one?
So take your phone and point it at the Apple logo, the California streaming Apple logo. You have to pull it up on a Mac or something, and then point your iPhone at it.
Okay, so you open your camera app and then
and point it at the Apple logo. Did it kick up the AR or no?
What do you mean kick up the AR? No, it didn't.
So hang on. Probably gonna have to Google the event notice.
Yes.
So whatever the Apple event notice is, that black screen that's got the Apple logo, if you point your camera at it, it opens up the AR.
It's not from the regular photo app on your phone?
Yeah, from your camera app. It should automatically kick on AR.
Nope.
Interesting. Okay, other people should try it, but basically when you pointed at that logo, this was from Evan in our group chat. You pointed at the logo and it starts up the AR app that Apple has built into the phone, and you could start moving the Apple logo anywhere in your field of view. And as you zoom into it, they were detailed enough to animate a reflection, a video into the reflection. So after I jump off, let me try one more time with my phone to make sure I'm telling you where to go.
And which iPhone is that, Chris?
I have an 11 Pro Max, so anything newer than that, I believe, would work.
Carl just sent me a link.
Yeah, I got a 12 Pro, and I'm like pointing at it, dude. I'm at the developer.apple.com, the California streaming logo, and it's not pulling it up. So is it an app we're supposed to point?
Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second, and I'll check my facts and tweet Tyler real quick.
Huh.
Yes, Tyler, you mentioned about color?
Yeah. Oh, I see. Oh, that's wicked. Yeah, now it's trying to play a video. That's weird. Yeah, so they're doing some fun AR stuff using the Apple itself as kind of like a QR code or a triggering link to start it. That's kind of cool. Okay.
How'd you trigger it? Like, do you just...
Carl sent me a specific link that kind of forced it to happen. Okay, so enough of the Apple rumor mongering. So the next big article, number 2, is from The Verge. It says that Twitter is going to test edge-to-edge pictures and videos in tweets on iOS to better support visual and text-based conversations. And I'm going to copy this and send it out so you can see what edge-to-edge Twitter images looks like. It looks a lot like Instagram or Facebook, who've been doing edge-to-edge for a long time. And once you see the side-by-side comparison, you'll think, Jesus, why didn't Twitter do this long ago? It's a much better experience. And The Verge, shamefully, doesn't mention the person who discovered this, which is our friend Jane Wong in Hong Kong, who discovered exactly this and tweeted it out, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, maybe at least a month ago. But now it's formally, officially recognized by the traditional tech press. But Jane, being a geek, always finds these things weeks before the company itself acknowledges it. Although Twitter knows that Jane's going to find it as soon as they put it in their code. And she was sending out screenshots on this a month ago. But good to see that they're going to. And in fact, Jack Dorsey even responded to her tweet when she tweeted it a month ago, where she said, "Oh, looks like Twitter's doing edge-to-edge photos now." And Jack responded to her tweet saying, "Looks much better," which it does. It looks a lot better. So,
Tyler, the news you give in here, so it comes on Sky and BBC 2 days later. So I'm listening to you, and then a couple of days later, I hear the same news on Sky News.
What? Any particular news or more than one?
Well, it was about. Gosh, I can't remember now. But when I heard it, I thought, "Oh God, I've heard this from Thailand." My wife said, "Shut up."
We're seeing this a lot lately, though. I have the same experience where I'm just cruising, Twitter, and people are tweeting out articles. Well, people send them in here. Somebody sent in a CNN article that we had been going on about there was an NPR article yesterday that we read that was like, well, we've been talking about this for a week. So yeah, it happens. So the next one up is that Twitter has begun testing another new feature, which I haven't seen Jane find this one, but maybe she did. She usually does. That Twitter's begin testing remove this follower tool on the web, which will allow users to remove followers without blocking those followers and without those followers knowing that they've been removed. So what happens? The person then realizes, oh, shoot, I used to follow Lakeisha, and now I'm not following Lakeisha. My phone must be buggy. What's going on? Like, how does that play out exactly? What goes through that person's mind when they realize they're no longer following that person?
This ties in perfectly to the persona stuff that you remember they're talking about. I don't know when it's being released, but this ties in perfectly to that, to having those multiple sub-accounts that are different personalities of yourself.
Right.
And we were saying what happens when when a colleague follows your personal account, your OnlyFans even, or your swimwear account. This ties in perfectly to that, because I imagine what happens is that the person is removed, in air quotes. They don't know it. They just don't see any of your posts anymore. Right. It just looks like your account is
eventually
dead.
They might notice it. Eventually they might be like, oh, I was following my mom and now I'm not. What's going on here? So that's what I'm wondering, is what happens in the event that the person does notice that they're no longer following somebody that they know for sure they used to follow.
Yeah, but not only that, but what will happen is if they notice anything, all you have to do is bring up that person, and it says on Twitter whether you're following them or not. So if it becomes where you're not following them, they'll notice that, hey, the follow toggle is in the wrong place. It's in the it's, and then what do you do if you refollow the person? Does it automatically knock it off?
No. From so if you are the person who has been like soft blocked, which is how this is like phrased in my head, it will still look like you're following them. So you won't know. It will still look like you're following them. That it will be.
That would be sinisterly genius. That's it.
That's how they must do this. And then you still think you're following them. It's just nothing. You don't.
So from your view, it still shows that you're following them.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that would be amazing.
I have a no-fly list. I have people on a certain list that they still follow me, vice versa, but they never see anything I post. Because I know that they just will always post bad stuff.
Because what some people do, there's somebody was tweeting about this article where they say what they do now is they block somebody and then unblock them, and what that does is it removes them from following them. So in a similar way. The other interesting point that you raised, Carl, is for those who don't know, what Carl was referring to was one of the coolest tech features we've seen in a long time, which is Twitter someday soon is going to reveal what they call multiple facets or aspects or profiles. What did they call it? Profiles, maybe?
I think it's facets, I think.
Yeah. I think they called it facets, yeah. Where today people have multiple Twitter accounts or Instagram accounts or multiple social media accounts on the same social media app. And you need a separate email for each of those accounts to log in. That's going to change. And what Twitter's saying is now you'll have one account, one email address, but you'll have multiple, what they called facets, or you could call them profiles, where you'll have your Tyler Crowley, who Swedish profile for all my Swedish friends and my events and all that. And then I have my Tyler Crowley profile for news, and then my profile for Clubhouse for all the people, and then my personal one for my my really close family and friends. And the what's interesting about that is it's a hint to why is Twitter so concerned. It's basically making one person one email address, and it allows you to use your email address for multiple profiles. But as we get into identity verification, that's where that becomes very useful, because you're going to want to identify the person with one email address and one login and one account. And that becomes very tricky when you're trying to identity verify somebody who's got 3 different email addresses or 3 different accounts, but it's actually one person. So how can you verify them on 3 different accounts? How can you verify the Tyler Crowley as the personal account, the family and friends, versus the work account versus the other accounts? It gets very messy. How you're gonna have 3 different blue checks for Tyler Crowley? That's 3 different accounts. So this whole, I think their reason for doing this is another indicator that this identity verification social media thing is coming.
What they've done is actually really clever, because they've done basically the groups from Facebook and Google+, but they've inverted it. What I mean by that is, on Facebook, you can set up groups. You can say, this is my family group, and then this is my friends group, this is my work group. And then when you do a post, you choose what groups can publicly see it. And the same with the fondly remembered Google+. But obviously Twitter is public first. That is, anybody can find you and then sign up to your account. They don't need permission. There's no friends requesting process before they see your content. So they've had to invert it. So instead of you choosing who sees it, anybody can see it until you choose to remove them from the specific group or facet in this case. So it's really clever, like how they figured out how to get the same functionality as these big social media platforms, even though they're coming at content from the opposite direction.
So, okay. So, oh no. Oh shit. Okay. Let's hope that didn't break my new drone. The next article up is that Microsoft is launching something new called Microsoft Start, a personalized news product via MicrosoftStart.com, Windows integrations, new mobile apps, and its edge-to-edge browser new tab page. Microsoft today is announcing its own personalized news reading experience called Microsoft Start, available as both a website and a mobile app. Microsoft News, where I wonder if they will cover all of their vulnerabilities and hacks that are happening on an hourly basis. Or will there be a notable lack of coverage of all of their government agencies that are constantly being hacked through their Microsoft products, which are rather big headlines rather frequently? Something tells me they won't be covering that with quite the same regularity as normal news. The next one up is from CNBC, that Ford announces that they've hired somebody. And why would Ford bother to announce that they've hired somebody? Well, in this case, they've hired the former Tesla and Apple, who
I thought so.
this Tesla executive, who prior to that was at Apple, not that long ago, mind you, went from Apple to Tesla and now to Ford rather quickly. And now Ford is giving this person the title of Chief Advanced Technology and Embedded Systems Officer. And I just have to think that, the person's name is Doug Field. I've never met Doug. I'm sure he's a swell guy, but he also seems to be not so entirely loyal to the companies he works at, and is willing to go to the highest bidder rather expeditiously.
Hey, Tyler, if it was something on the information, usually I don't get to see this stuff, but somehow I got something from one of their columnists today on this subject. I could read it to you on this exact issue if you want me to read about this Apple guy.
Okay.
Okay, so it says Apple's car project loses key driver. Apple's loss of senior auto executive Doug Field to Ford tells us two things. One, Ford is a more serious rival in electric cars and other new technology than perhaps people give it credit for. Two, the reverse is likely true about Apple. As long as Field had stayed at Apple, his experience in the field, he previously worked at Tesla and at Ford, had made him a symbol of Apple's prospects, even when the company cut hundreds of workers from its Project Titan car effort 3 years ago. His loss, therefore, immediately raises questions about where Apple goes next. It doesn't help that, as noted by Bloomberg, Fields is the fourth member of Apple's car group management team to leave since February, and the fourth Apple car division chief to leave. Its deep pockets should position Apple to be a contender in cars, but it's beginning to look like the scale of the undertaking may be simply too challenging for the iPhone maker. So that was the comment from the information today.
Cool. Thank you for that. So the next big headline says Coinbase says that the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, threatened to sue over its yet-to-be-launched Lend program, following discussions with the SEC for almost 6 months. Crypto exchange Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong responded Tuesday evening to planned enforcement by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission pertaining to the firm's recently yield-generating product. And this is a nice follow-up to the article we read yesterday, which said that the finance industry and the Wall Street and the banks are getting very, very nervous about these crypto entities functioning like finance institutions or banks, for lack of a better word. And lending is certainly part of that. And the article we read yesterday profiled, somebody remember which crypto company it profiled, of a 30-year-old founder across the Hudson from Wall Street, and they've got 850 employees, and they're doing huge transactions, and they're growing way faster, like gangbusters. And
Blockify.
So Blockify?
Yeah.
Okay. And so this one today, Coinbase is even bigger. Coinbase is huge. Coinbase is even publicly traded company. They did their IPO several months ago, one of the biggest IPOs ever. And so this is getting really interesting. If Coinbase does start functioning like a bank, you're going to start the SEC dragging their feet. It's making bankers nervous, understandably. So it says the firm, which went public on the NASDAQ stock exchange in April, received a subpoena by the SEC less than 3 months after it announced to the market a product dubbed Lend that would allow users.
It's a Wells notice, which is different. A Wells notice basically is a notification from the government that they're going to bring an action against you. Very often it's used in criminal cases, but this is the SEC, so it's not criminal. So the SEC is giving them a Wells notice saying, basically, we're going to bring an enforcement action against you. We're going to give you an opportunity to bring your lawyers, whatever, in. You sit down with us, and then you should try to explain to us why we shouldn't bring this enforcement action. But that's what a Wells notice is. It's a warning that this is happening, but we're going to give you some narrow window to come in and talk to us to explain why we shouldn't take the action.
Yeah, and I guess Coinbase is understandably a little concerned why they're doing this even before the product's even really been released. So it's called Lend, and it would allow users of Coinbase the opportunity to earn double-digit yields on deposits of USDC, the US stablecoin, on its platform. That's a much juicier yield than what is offered by consumer banks, which provide less than a basis point or 1% for savings accounts. Armstrong said, which is Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, said that the exchange, meaning Coinbase, contacted the SEC about its yield product, and the SEC told Coinbase that the offering is a security, but gave no guidance on the compliance with existing laws. In a tweet, Armstrong says, they refuse to tell us why they think it's a security, and instead subpoena a bunch of records from us, and we complied. They demand testimony from our employees. We complied, and then tell us they will be suing us if we proceed to launch with zero explanation as to why. According to Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, the SEC refused to meet with the chief executive, meaning Brian himself, during a visit to DC earlier this year. The SEC was the only regulator that refused to meet with me, saying, "We're not meeting with any crypto companies," Armstrong wrote. This was right after we became the first crypto company to go public in the US. In a blog post, the firm's chief legal officer, named Brian Growell, said that Coinbase has been proactively engaging with the SEC about Lend for nearly 6 months. He said that if the product officially launched, the SEC would sue. Despite Coinbase keeping Lend off the market and providing detailed information, the SEC still won't explain why they see a problem. Rather, they have now told us that if we launch Lend, they intend to sue. Yet again, we asked if the SEC would share their reasoning with us, and yet again, they've refused. BlockFi, a crypto financial services provider, has also been under fire for a similar product, which offers users a high yield when they park stablecoin with the company. 5 states have said that the firm has violated securities regulations and laws. In addition to plans to offer a yield on USDC coins held by the company, Coinbase offers other yield-generating services via proof-of-stake protocols like Ethereum 2.0 and Tezos. A source said the SEC action does not apply to staking.
So Tyler, maybe a couple points here. One is it looks to me like selective enforcement because there's so much of this lending going on. Where there's a variety of companies in the crypto world that are basically paying these high interest rates. It's they're paying it in crypto, so it's almost like a payment in kind bond. And I think that maybe so it's not even necessarily about banking. I think it could be just about, well, this kind of looks like maybe it competes with money markets, or it's supposed to, or with higher yields, or it competes with commercial paper or corporate debt. I mean, there's so many things that you could claim it competes with, but that's why they're going to claim it looks like a security. But I think it's selective enforcement because there's so much of this out there in the crypto world, and they're almost like punishing Coinbase that's trying to do the right thing because they're more regulated than a lot of these other players in the market, and so Coinbase tried to do the right thing. It's like they went to the regulators first,
Right.
and then all the other companies that they're competing against who don't even bother going to the regulators, they're out there in the wild west. And by the way, I don't know if, how many people heard it, but Justin Higgins a couple hours ago had the guy who was one of Barack Obama's foreign policy guys, and so that was mostly about what it was. But he got asked a question, and he just went off the rails on crypto. He basically portrayed crypto as in general as an immense national security threat to the United States. And I don't know if he was that educated on it, and some people took him to task after he left. But he definitely went after crypto.
So
The comments.
go ahead,
Tyler, if I could add a couple of comments.
Sure.
I think that stable coins are clearly the threat to some institutions in the U.S. But on the other hand, if you look at the ownership of Coinbase, you have big players like ARK Investment, Cathie Wood's Fund, Vanguard, Tiger Global, Citadel,
Andreessen Horowitz.
So I think that there's going to be a balancing act there.
Yeah. So Brian's Twitter account, he did a tweet thread just 3 hours ago where he says some really sketchy behavior coming out of the SEC recently. Story time. Millions of crypto holders have been earning yield on their assets over the last few years. It makes sense. If you want to lend out your funds, you can earn a return. Everyone seems happy. A bunch of great companies in crypto have been offering versions of this for years. Coinbase came out recently and said we would be launching our own version. We were planning to go live in a few weeks, so we reached out to the SEC to give them a friendly heads up and briefing. They responded by telling us this lend feature is a security. Okay, seems strange. How can lending be a security? So we asked the SEC to help us understand and share their view. We always want to make an effort to work proactively with regulators and keep an open mind. They refuse to tell us why they think it's a security and instead subpoena a bunch of records from us and we comply, demand testimony from our employees, we comply, and then tell us they will be suing us if we proceed to launch with zero explanation as to why. Look, we're committed to following the law. Sometimes the law is unclear, so if the SEC wants to publish guidance, we are also happy to follow that. It's nice if you actually enforce it evenly across the industry, equally, by the way. But in this case, they are refusing to offer any opinion in writing to the industry on what should be allowed and why, and instead are engaging in intimidation tactics behind closed doors. Whatever their theory is here, it feels like a reach land grab versus other regulators. Meanwhile, plenty of other crypto companies continue to offer a lend feature, but Coinbase is somehow not allowed to. Gensler, which is the boss of the SEC, in his confirmation hearing said, quote, "It's important for the SEC to provide guidance and clarity. Sometimes that's a clarity that will be a thumbs up, but even if it's a thumb down, it's important to provide that," which it was quoted on March 2nd of this year. Brian continues, "If you don't want this activity, then simply publish your position in writing and enforce it evenly across the industry. Ostensibly, the SEC's goal is to protect investors and create fair markets. So who are they protecting here and where is the harm? People seem pretty happy to be earning yield on these various products across lots of other crypto companies. Shutting them down would arguably be harming consumers more than protecting them. And by preventing Coinbase from launching the same thing that other companies already have live, they're creating an unfair market." In May of this year, I traveled to DC to meet with every regulator and branch of government that I could. The SEC was the only regulator that refused to meet with me, saying, "We're not meeting with any crypto companies." This was right after we became the first crypto company to go public in the US. Gensler had been confirmed just a month prior, so brushing it off as the SEC still getting its feet under it, now I'm not so sure. We've always tried to be good actors in the space, leaning into sensible regulation even when it was difficult or expensive. We try to think about what products would want for ourselves and what risks we would want our families to be aware of before launching products. We will keep following this approach. Yet here, we're being threatened with legal action before a single bit of actual guidance has been given to the industry on these products. If we end up in court, we may finally get the regulatory clarity the SEC refuses to provide. By litigation should be the last resort for the SEC, not the first. Our door remains open. Hopefully the SEC steps up to create a clarity this industry deserves without harming consumers and companies in the process. America could really use us all working together to figure this out right now. End of tweet thread. So I'm going to
This is just panic mode from the SEC, right? Like they're looking around and all these cryptocurrencies are developing technologies and methodologies and platforms that they don't even know how to recognize. They have no idea. They're still catching up. Like, what is it? What could it be? Holy crap, tech moves, at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So even if we classify whatever this is now, we don't know what it will be in 6 months' time, and then they'll have 500 million users. And then Coinbase comes out with this, and they go, "Crap, Coinbase is pretty big. Let's just throw a spanner in the works," and then refuse to talk to them while we try and buy ourselves some time to figure out exactly what the holy F is going on in the industry and what we should do about it. But it just seems like that. Like they had to do something just to slow shit down while they figure out their stance on this.
Yep. Okay. So the next one is Ray-Ban and Facebook's VP of A&R and VR, which is Andrew Bosworth, appear to be teasing smart glasses with a point of view recording feature that could be announced Thursday. It looks like, well, and by the way, Apple's big event happens. This is now 2 quarters in a row, two times in a year, in the past year, where Apple announces the date of their big event and Facebook announces an event days before. Have you noticed this? Anyone else noticed that? This is now twice in a row this has happened, where Facebook is stealing some thunder because Facebook might be concerned that the Apple event will be big on AR, and they have very good reasons to believe that. Even the invitation triggers an AR event from your device. So, really interesting to see Facebook might whip together an event on short notice to...
They just don't want the headline to be that Apple brings AR to the world, because Facebook has already, and
Yeah,
that's
I mean, if it,
unfortunately the way everyone sees it is once Apple does it, oh, it's for the world now.
I remember mentioning this last time. It was right before WWDC. And right before WWDC, Facebook's event was, I don't know, 3-4 days before
That
WWDC.
that was when I fell in love with this room, man. Michael was there cracking jokes.
Yeah.
Everyone was,
But now
yeah.
this
For me,
this
that's
is
when it
this is
was
quite
serious.
remarkable for 2 times in a row. Apple announces their date on an event which is likely to feature AR in a significant way, and then Facebook is likely to launch something right before. So very interesting.
Just
This
just
is
to
Tyler,
very
if
high
clarify,
school.
sorry, go on, Chris.
Very high school. It's like I'm having a party. It's like, well, I'm gonna have one a day before you.
I've got a kegger. How many kegs are they going to have at their party?
yeah,
Yeah.
Just to
Tyler, the thing wasn't it the Facebook event that we're like looking at paint drying on the wall?
I guess that would. I don't remember if that was that particular event or not. And hopefully this.
It was one of them that were so bad that
I no, it
they
wasn't. It
It
actually
was.
was
were
so
yawning.
staged. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that event because that event was just about. It was supposed to be about e-commerce and shopping and stuff like that. The other one was an actual AR VR event where they talked about video games and the future of AR with games and how they've got a lot of the top game titles, and they were just reminding everybody that they're a big player in the space. So back to this headline for a second. Ray-Ban, which is, everyone knows is one of the world's biggest sunglass manufacturers and Facebook's head of AR and VR, appeared to be teasing smart glasses with a point of view recording feature that could be announced on Tuesday. It looks like we'll be getting the first details about Facebook's collaboration with Ray-Ban on a pair of smart glasses later this week. And indeed, that's almost certainly true because Andrew Bosworth, who's mentioned in the title of that article, is retweeting the article, which means it's true. So that's all the verification you need that it's correct. So we look forward to that streaming event on Thursday. The next article up is from Reuters that Bitcoin fell 17% to around 43,000 US dollars before rising to 47,000 as El Salvador adopts its legal tender where high demand led to the Chivo wallet being temporarily unplugged. I don't know that this El Salvador news is such old news to people in the Bitcoin community that I don't know that the fact that it actually launched has any bearing on its
No,
price.
Tyler, I think I read it last night, and I think it's to do with that they couldn't get it going, and the president of the country was tweeting about it to say how they had to stop the launch of it or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's
I think the price drop, Tyler, is primarily due to whales who wanted to take profits. They put their coins on exchanges last week, and they saw that there was leveraged options that they could wreck, and that's it's some manipulation going on.
yeah.
Yeah, like big scale. I was in a room where they're talking like they'll have like groups go, all right, you drop the price and then raise it back up. Like that's like strategically being done a lot.
So Coinbase's headline says President of El Salvador says the country bought 550 Bitcoins on Monday as the law making Bitcoin legal tender in El Salvador goes into effect. And crypto adoption is accelerating in the developing world, especially in regions. We covered that yesterday. So the everyone's going to be watching this with a lot of interest, and the future of Bitcoin in South and Central and Latin America for sure could depend on how this plays out with El Salvador. Balaji took to Twitter to say that the International Monetary Fund pretends to make countries independent. Bitcoin actually makes countries independent, that's a hot take there. And
I think just quickly on the El Salvador thing, Tyler. An interesting thing of this that hadn't occurred to me before is that you've got companies now have a safe haven in which to. Like, this has probably been mentioned, but I haven't heard it mentioned. They've got a safe place to try it out. So you've got a number of companies like McDonald's, for instance, now saying, "Hey, this is a thing in El Salvador. We'll start accepting Bitcoin payments for our products in
right.
Salvador." This is McDonald's. So it gives them a place to where they can save face, where it's safe. They can play with the technology. They can play with the transfer technology, physical technology, like how they have to update their card machines and their auto services, and they can do all of this in a safe space because El Salvador is supporting it. So that's going to be super interesting.
Sandboxing, yeah. So Starbucks and every big company that wants to get a glimpse of the future can implement it there. And
exactly. Every company wants to move away from Visa.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? As Tyler is talking in Clubhouse about this topic, Carl is texting himself at the back channel of Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah. So
you could just press the button and join us, right?
Yeah. The next one is from CNBC. That Microsoft says it has acquired in-browser video editing software startup called Clipchamp, which has 17 million registered users, and so you'll have in-browser video editing from Microsoft coming soon. The next one is from Variety out of Los Angeles, which covers the entertainment industry, or Hollywood as we call it. And it says that Hulu is raising the prices of its 2 on-demand plans by $1 a month starting October 8th. And Hulu with ads will now cost $6.99 per month, and Hulu without ads will cost $12.99 per month. On Tuesday, Hulu began notifying subscribers that as of October 8th, the price of Hulu's 2 on-demand platforms with and without ads will go up $1 each. The next one is that Lenovo unveils the 14-inch IdeaPad Slim 7 Carbon and the 16-inch Slim 7 Pro. And so these are their versions of MacBooks, and they're launching their 14-inch and 16-inch now 1 week before the Apple event, which is quite possibly going to launch their actual MacBook Pro 14-inch and 16-inch. So it's yet another tech company feeling the pressure to get the jump on Apple's announcements next week at their event. And then the next article is crypto exchange called FTX lands an endorsement deal with NBA star Stephen Curry, who has 15 million Twitter followers, joining football stars Tom Brady and Trevor Lawrence. The operator crypto exchange FTX has struck its latest endorsement deal, this time with NBA star Steph Curry. And the firm announced Tuesday that Curry will serve as an ambassador for the firm, following in the footsteps of Tom Brady and Trevor Lawrence, who signed similar deals with the fast-growing crypto derivatives unit. I'm excited to partner with a company that demystifies the crypto space and eliminates the intimidation factor for first-time users, says Curry, who plays for the Golden State Warriors. FTX is like-minded when it comes to giving back to the community in meaningful ways, and I can't wait to see what we can achieve together, FTX said in a statement. That Curry will receive an equity stake in FTX Trading Limited, and Curry's foundation, Eat, Learn, Play, will partner with FTX on charitable initiatives. And the exchange closed a $900 million funding round at an $18 billion valuation in July. As for Curry, this marks the 33-year-old's first foray into the crypto market. After meeting and speaking with Stephen, it was clear that he is a seamless fit for FTX. FTX CEO Sam Bankman-Fried said his tireless commitment to charities, alongside a ferocious work ethic to become the greatest in any arena he steps foot in, whether it's basketball, investing, or business, perfectly aligned with FTX core values. I look forward to working together with Stefan to create a positive impact for those who need it most in the world. So, FTX is booming, and maybe this strategy of working with celebrity endorsers is something others will follow. The next one from ABC out of Australia, that Australia's High Court affirms earlier rulings that media companies can be held responsible for Facebook comments posted under stories in their Facebook pages. A High Court has dismissed an appeal by some of Australia's biggest media companies, including the Sydney Morning Herald and the Australian, and finding the publishers of third-party comments on their Facebook pages. Boy, Australia's kind of wacky with their rulings, huh? Former Northern Territory detainee Dylan Voller wants to sue the companies in the New South Wales Supreme Court over alleged defamatory comments on their Facebook pages. But the case had been stalled by a dispute over whether the outlets were the publishers of the material. The High Court today found that by running the Facebook pages, the media groups participated in communicating any defamatory material posted by third parties and were therefore responsible for the comments. Wow. Today's decision cleared the way for Mr. Voller to continue his defamation case against some of Australia's biggest media companies. Mr. Voller's treatment as a detainee sparked a royal commission into the Northern Territory's youth detention system after images of him shackled to a chair wearing a spit hood were revealed by ABC's Four Corners program. He launched the defamation action in the New South Wales Supreme Court against groups including the Sydney Morning Herald, the Australian Sky News, over third-party comments about him on their Facebook pages. But the case was sidetracked when the debate arose about whether the media companies were the publishers of the comments in question. Today, the High Court rejected the argument that to be a publisher, an outlet must know of the relevant defamatory matter and intent to convey it. The court ruled that by creating a public Facebook page and posting content, the outlets had facilitated, encouraged, and thereby assisted the publication of comments by third-party Facebook users, and they were therefore publishers of these comments. So if somebody comments on your Facebook, if you post a piece of content on Facebook and people comment on that piece of content, the court is holding you responsible for those Facebook comments because I assume they're basing this decision on the fact that you could remove those Facebook comments that might be defamatory. And so if they are defamatory, you're responsible for letting them stay there. And you're economically responsible for any defamation that occurs from the Facebook comments of your post. So it says there has not yet been a ruling on whether or not the comments that were put were actually defamatory. And the publishers do have other defenses they can rely on, but lawyers for Mr. Voller said their client was pleased with today's outcome and has a sense of vindication. Yeah, no doubt. In a statement, his legal team also welcomed the ruling for its wider implications, where they said, this is a historic step forward in achieving justice for Dylan and also in protecting individuals, especially those who are in a vulnerable position from being the subject of unmitigated social media mob attacks. This decision put responsibility where it should be on media companies with huge resources to monitor public comments in circumstances where they know there is a strong likelihood of an individual being defamed. This gets really interesting because so now it shouldn't only be, your Facebook profile and the comment and your posts and the comments to your posts. Facebook itself, here's the interesting thing, Facebook legally is not responsible for what people say on the platform. So that's why he's not suing Facebook, because the law protects Facebook as a platform. But the Facebook account owner, meaning Sky News, is able to remove those comments but didn't. And that's where the court is deciding that they need to be able to curate any defamation that might occur on their profile page. What gets interesting is, what if it was not a comments to a post, but a live audio chat room after the fact, and people were talking and saying things? This is just a really, really interesting ruling out of Australia. So.
But from a legal standpoint, it's bonkers. There's a lot of stories coming out of Australia at the moment about rights and whatnot, and how a lot of laws are being pushed through very quickly. It's a bit of a crazy place for choice and free speech at the moment, and it's not the place where you would assume these headlines would come from. But from a technical standpoint, it's simple, right? Because all of these platforms, when you post something, you can turn off comments. So what it means is that all of these news platforms, they'll just switch off the ability to comment, whether it's a YouTube feed or a Twitter post or a Facebook post. They'll just switch off comments off their posts. And one could argue that the world would be a better place. I mean, if you've ever gone through any news article on Facebook and then gone through the comments, it's an absolute cesspit. So while the ruling's mental, dealing with it as a publisher will be relatively easy because you've just got that toggle.
Well, yeah, but then Facebook's going to not like that because now everyone's going to turn off comments on all of their posts.
I was also maybe going to add that I don't know if you noticed yet, but it's not as easy to turn off comments on Facebook because it's meant to be conversational. So we actually encourage page owners to moderate it rather than just silencing people on the comment section.
A whole bunch of people talking on Twitter about this one. Anyway, really interesting, that one. So the next one from Nikkei Japan, PayPal to acquire Japan-based Paydi, a buy now, pay later service in Japan. Well, there you go. I'm kicking myself for not. That's one market we hadn't considered the buy now, pay later, but no doubt it's in Japan. And now PayPal is buying the buy now, pay later of Japan for $2.7 billion in cash. PayPal expects the deal to be completed by December. My God, these buy now, pay later companies just print money, man, wherever they happen to go.
I was looking at Crunchbase. This company has been around since 2008, Tyler.
Paydi?
2008.
Which company? Paydi?
Paydi, yeah. Paydi, yeah.
Since 2008. Wow.
Yep.
There's actually an interesting buy now, pay later platform called QuadPay. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. They have some AI tech, and with issuing credit, they're growing pretty quick. You might want to check that out, where you can go on there, purchase something, and make 4 payments. The buy now, pay later, but they're actually platforming this buy now, pay later, not just as a transaction, but like creating an ecosystem around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if you look now, like you can't go to Walgreens or CVS or any of these stores without seeing in the top right corner that they have some bank that they're starting now. I think the Fed has probably been signaling to people that if you become a bank, we're going to throw money at you.
So the next one up is from DW out of Europe.
Tyler, just quickly,
yep.
On that particular point, I don't know whether you were reading that from the writer's article. Square actually bought another Australian one, similar sort of thing. Which
Afterpay.
Yeah.
That was a month ago, yeah.
Yeah. And 29 billion.
Yeah, that was a huge purchase, yeah.
Huge.
The next one's from DW out of Europe, that Germany's Federal Criminal Police Office confirms it bought Israel's NSO group Pegasus spyware in 2019 and used it in operations on terrorism and organized crime since March. So interesting. I wonder who found that out. No doubt some Germans used the tool to find out if they had Pegasus installed on their devices, and then realized, oh wow, there's a whole bunch of Germans that you have it too. Oh, me too. Obviously, Germany's using it. The next one's from TechCrunch, that a UK-based car insurance startup called Marshmallow, which uses a wide array of algorithms to measure insurance risk, raises $85 million at a $1.2 billion valuation. And here they come. Here come the algorithmic car insurance companies, and not just car insurance, all kinds of insurance, because algorithms can analyze data like no human can, and these tech companies can have better algorithms and better AIs to do better analysis of insurance in real time than the traditional insurance companies. And you're going to see a huge boom. You're going to see, just like this headline, just like we see all these buy now, pay laters getting acquired, and those all started, a few years ago. Now you're going to see a whole lot of tech investors investing in insurance tech, like this one, Marshmallow, raising $85 million at just over $1 billion valuation. And then you'll see them be acquired by the big insurance giants in about 2 or 3 years from now, when they realize we either buy them or we will be replaced by them. So they're going to acquire them. So the next one is Microsoft warns of an actively abused 0-day that exploits a
Here's your
vulnerabilities.
hourly Microsoft update.
It's your daily update that Microsoft is Swiss cheese and provides no security of any kind. Yet another 0-day exploit, a vulnerability in Internet Explorer's browser engine, is now being announced yet again. And the question is, will Microsoft announce maybe that's why they're launching their own news site, Microsoft Start, where it's just, your daily update of what part of their ecosystem has
Because
been
if you use a
exploited.
browser to access the site, you'd get a virus. But if you listen to it, you can't. It's like a condom for your ears.
The next one is that UiPath reports their Q2 earnings. Who cares? Intel's CEO says that Intel plans to spend up to $95 billion. Jesus, that's not chump change. On 2 new chip making facilities in Europe. And the next one from the New York Times says they have research that only 49 out of 4,700 board seats at 843 companies, backed by the top 18 U.S. VCs and private equity firms that went public since 2000, have been held by black directors. That's what you call a minority. That's what 0.1%. And so the New York Times reporting that one. And then what else do we have in the big Twitter stories? A survey that 93.9% of U.S. consumers with Apple Pay activated on their phones don't use it to buy items in stores, 7 years after Apple launched the service. So why is Apple Pay not working?
Because they when they launched it, they really pissed off a lot of the retailers because they were charging a premium on the transaction fees. And so the retailers stopped promoting Apple Pay because they were getting overcharged on the transaction fees just to use Apple Pay. And essentially they got too greedy, and basically screwed themselves out, because then Samsung Pay came out, Android Pay, and they tried to use Apple Pay as like a premier feature, but also charge the retailers for it. So you started seeing a move like maybe 2 or 3 years ago where they weren't talking about Apple Pay anymore. They were just talking about contactless payments.
That's really interesting, Chris. And I guess I'm also thinking about it from a consumer behavior standpoint. So it'd be really interesting to see usage data by, demographic or by country, to see where, countries in which you have more accelerated forms of payment, people are using contactless payment providers, but probably still not Apple Pay, because there are other options. Whereas, in economies like the US, where I think that there's still a lot of growth opportunity in this space, overall usage is already low because it's not part of how people buy things. And then, combined with what you've just shared in terms of there not being an incentive from the retailer standpoint to actually incentivize, people to do so. I mean, I just think it could be really interesting to look at the data.
There's somebody tweeting that they use it mainly if you have Apple Watch and you have your credit card in your Apple Watch. My God, is that convenient? That's how I use it in Sweden. Every retailer in all of Sweden has a contactless checkout little terminal, and boy, does having it on your watch make things just insanely simple.
DBS, the biggest bank in Singapore, is actually promoting Apple Pay. The reason why I know is because, remember, I told you over the weekend I actually applied for renew my credit card, and then they say that they're going to send the credit card to me. But if I want to use it immediately, I can link it up with Apple Pay. It was in the email.
Yeah, you don't have to wait for the physical card. That's the other benefit.
Yep.
So the other...
Hey, Tyler, check the audience real quick.
Okay, will do. And there's LS. Okay.
And one last thing on the Apple Pay thing, it did bring a lot to the table, because, remember with the Target hack, like millions and millions of credit card numbers got out. And what's unique about Apple Pay is that every time you go to check out, a virtual credit card number gets presented to the retailer, and that's what they store. So if there's ever a data breach when you use Apple Pay, the credit card number on file associated with that transaction is actually dead or useless at that point.
Yeah, it's pretty brilliant in that way. So there's one other lingering headline that's still popular today that we covered when we met 12 hours ago about from the Wall Street Journal that researchers are developing smart toilets that can scan urine and feces samples for health data using cameras and machine learning, raising privacy concerns because they're trying to get data from your shit. You know what I mean? So, but it could be very helpful. Could be incredibly, incredibly helpful. And by the way, that was a prediction that we had here. I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. I said very clearly that we will have smart toilets that do exactly this, and now here they come. So that's the big boring headlines. So thank you for staying through those. But now we get into the really fun headlines that everyone's tweeting in. Like this one from NPR, that new studies find evidence of a superhuman immunity to COVID-19 in some individuals. Some scientists have called it super immunity or bulletproof, but immunologist Shane Crotty prefers hybrid immunity. Overall, hybrid immunity to SARS-CoV-2 appears to be impressively potent. No matter what you call it, this type of immunity offers much needed good news in what seems like an endless array of bad news about COVID. Over the past several months, a series of studies have found that some people mount an extraordinarily powerful immune response to COVID, the coronavirus that causes the disease COVID-19. Their bodies produce very high levels of antibodies, but they also make antibodies with great flexibility, like capable of fighting off the coronavirus variants circulating in the world, but also likely effective against variants that may emerge in the future. One could reasonably predict that these people will be quite well protected against most and perhaps all of the COVID variants that we are likely to see in the foreseeable future, says a virologist at Rockefeller University, who helped lead several of the studies. In a study published online, they found antibodies in these individuals can strongly neutralize the 6 variants of concern that were tested, including Delta and Beta, as well as several other viruses related to COVID, including one in bats, 2 in pangolins, and one that caused the first coronavirus pandemic, SARS-CoV-1. This is being a bit more speculative, but I would also suspect that they would have some degree of protection against SARS-like viruses that have yet to infect humans. So who are these people capable of mounting superhuman or hybrid immune responses? People who have had a hybrid exposure to the virus. Specifically, they were infected with the coronavirus in 2020 and then immunized with mRNA vaccines this year. Those people have amazing responses to the vaccine, says virologist at Rockefeller University, who also helped lead several of the studies. I think they are in the best position to fight the virus. The antibodies in these people's blood can even neutralize SARS-CoV-1, the first coronavirus, which emerged 20 years ago. That virus is very, very different from SARS-CoV-2. In fact, these antibodies were even able to deactivate a virus engineered on purpose to be highly resistant to neutralization. This virus contained 20 mutations that are known to prevent COVID-2 antibodies from binding to it. Antibodies from people who are only vaccinated or who only had prior coronavirus infections were essentially useless against this mutant virus. But antibodies in people with the hybrid immunity could neutralize it. These findings show how powerful the mRNA vaccines can be in people with prior exposure to COVID. There's a lot of research now focused on finding a pan-coronavirus vaccine that would protect against all future variants. Our findings tell you that we already have it. But there's a catch. You first need to be sick with COVID-19. After natural infections, the antibodies seem to evolve and become not only more potent, but also broader. They become more resistant to mutations within the virus.
So I have my PhD in virology from YouTube, but just wanted to say that there's a great episode with on Lex Friedman podcast with Vincent Razzaniello, and actually he pointed to the same results that he's seen in studies, that people who have been infected and then got an mRNA vaccine are looking to be a lot more immune. So it's a bit of a paradox that it's actually good, I guess, to go through it in case if you don't get long COVID, and then and then you are good to go if you take the mRNA.
Yeah, wow. This is for once some pleasant, positive news here. So for those who got COVID early and then got an mRNA, boy, you seem to have hit the COVID lottery here.
Yeah, provided that you don't have long COVID, right? Which
Right.
really fucks. So.
Yeah.
I'll just mention that Shane Crotty has been doing interesting work throughout the pandemic.
Okay. So the next one up is from Pam, who's listening, that Mercedes' new tech lets you control your car with your mind. Car controls are getting smarter and smaller, but Mercedes wants to do away with them with a brand new mind controlling technology. It's a headset that you wear, and it can sense triggers from your mind that will be used to control the car. And not so much the actual driving of the car, but the control panel of the car. So you don't need to use your hands to touch anything while you're driving. Well, you're not really driving, the car's driving itself. This would have been more useful perhaps when we were still using our hands on the wheels. And so you could control the radio or the air conditioner just by turning it on and off with your thoughts, which is a very real scenario. There are headsets that can detect and you can train these headsets to do very simple tasks. And there was a very related article last week about Apple having a patent now to control aspects of your phone in a very similar way, which of course you can. Our regular folks will remember, I've told the story of how I played a soccer match with such a device, moving a remote control ball with my thoughts, and me versus a friend competing to push the ball into each other's goal. And it works, and it works very well. So yeah, I think these devices will become very popular in the near future for interesting use cases such as that. The next one up is Hamish. I see you had your hand up and I invited you up, but maybe you need to jump out and back in before you can get on stage. So Cheryl sends in this one from Singapore, the Straits Times. When it comes to Delta variant, one thing has become clear: vaccination is not enough. And now Singapore's telling the Singaporeans to keep your mask on, hands clean, and guard up, even if you have been vaccinated against COVID-19. And that might be true, but if you had COVID and then you got an mRNA, you're good to go, it seems. So,
and what was the vaccine Singapore used? Wasn't it Sinovac?
No, of course not. We do Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna for the public vaccination. There is, I think, 85,000 doses of Sinovac available at private clinics if people want to pay for themselves. But I read that those people who actually paid for themselves to get Sinovac, they are now hoping to get the mRNA vaccine. But the inoculation, the vaccination rate in Singapore is about between 80 to 85% now, by the way.
Okay. And then we've got this one from Katarina about about long COVID. These are the most common long-haul COVID symptoms in kids. So it's a chance to play our favorite game. And here's what parents need to know. What are the most common symptoms of long-haul COVID in kids? Is Messi on stage? Watch out, everybody. Messi is
not getting out of bed on time, being a narky teenager. Lack of energy.
No.
Cough.
Can you repeat the question?
What the most common long-haul COVID symptoms in kids?
But they don't want to go to school.
I'm gonna give
sluggishness.
I'm giving a point to Dave for number one. Symptom number one is fatigue. So
coughing.
Shortness of breath.
Visual disturbance.
Excessive gaming, as opposed to the Chinese.
Fatigue.
Fatigue was number one.
Lack of concentration.
Fever.
Coughing?
No, close. It's shortness of breath, and number two is brain fog.
No appetite.
What did you say? Number three? Brain something?
Brain fog. And then other common symptoms are loss of smell and taste, headaches, muscle pain, and that rounds it out. So Dave gets a point on that one. Well done, Dave. Woo, woo. Yes, and the next. Oh my goodness, a lot of COVID headlines today, and this one is actually more about TikTok than about COVID, but the headline from Vice is a very viral story, no pun intended, about how anti-vaxxers are learning how to game TikTok's algorithms, and well, there might be more than meets the eye here, because the Vice headline talks about how anti-vaxxers are going viral on TikTok. No pun intended. And it claims that they've done it because they've figured out how to master the algorithms. That's a logical assumption. They must have figured out the algorithm. That's why they're going viral. I would like to propose a potential conspiracy theory as to why these anti-vaxxer are going viral on TikTok. And the article points out that these anti-vaxxers have very low followers numbers, yet their views are going viral. And why is that? That's very strange. That's not normally how TikTok works. So perhaps it's worth considering that Facebook was also dealing with a lot of COVID misinformation and came out to say that there's state actors who are pushing misinformation campaigns. And TikTok, it recently became one of its 3 board seats is now the Chinese government. And that happened 2 weeks ago. And then last week, China itself said they need control of TikTok's algorithms in China. This was publicly reported very widely by lots of publications, that China wants to control the algorithms of TikTok to reduce the amount of bad content that people are exposed to in China. And so would they also potentially have control of the algorithms in the US? And they have 1 of 3 board seats in the company. And now there's viral videos in the US from anti-vaxxers. So perhaps these anti-vaxxers with very low followers going viral has more to do with the algorithm and kind of misinformation campaign on TikTok. Not so different than what we've seen from Facebook's own internal team reporting misinformation campaigns by China. So is China weaponizing TikTok to spread misinformation about COVID?
Well, I cannot speak to what you're actually doing, but all I would say is from an algorithm perspective and how you design it, you only just target it to a specific country code. So it's not really an issue, and you can be anywhere, and you can A/B test your algorithm logic by just simply targeting to a certain demographic.
Great point, Maria. Somebody should do some A/B testing on people in different geographies and to see how different it is. Yeah, great point.
Maria,
and Tyler, the Chinese never said that they were worried about bad content outside of China. They only said in China. They were very transparent about it.
Fair enough. So the next one up is from JT, that Facebook teases their Ray-Ban sunglasses. We covered that as one of the big stories. Thank you, JT. And Willie sent in one up here from Protocol that the headline reads, "Here's why SoftBank just invested in the metaverse." SoftBank's opportunity fund just invested in a metaverse startup called DNA Block. And it marks SoftBank's official entry into the metaverse. And it's a potential leader of the creator economy, enabling 3D creation as there's a rising demand for user-generated content. Indeed, there is, like Roblox and Minecraft, and that whole genre is kind of exploding, Axie Infinity and whatnot. So it does make sense. But it's called...
I got some SoftBank news.
Go ahead.
That was the information if you want. Since SoftBank is becoming a 4.5% shareholder in German phone giant Deutsche Telekom as part of what is called a strategic partnership. Apparently, I guess they're going to be able to do things with some of their T-Mobile shares now that they weren't able to do in terms of using them to finance other things as part of this investment. So it says SoftBank said it could use the new Deutsche Telekom stake as well as what's left of its T-Mobile stock for finance and hedging purposes, which means the investment giant will be able to borrow against the shares for other investments.
Okay. Thanks for that. So the next one is who sent this one in? Dan Malaire sent in this one from Sifted, which is a sister publication of the Financial Times out of Europe. And the headline reads that fintechs slam UK regulator for licensing delays. UK fintechs waiting to get regulatory approval are stuck in a long queue as applications spike at an understaffed FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. So the FCA is in high demand after seeing a 70% spike in applications for payment licenses in the past year, fueled by Brexit, rule changes, and a flurry of new cash-rich startups. But the FCA is struggling to cope with the influx, London fintech says. Sifted spoke to nearly a dozen fintechs who complained the FCA had left them in the dark for months about the status of their applications. Many of the individuals interviewed by Sifted believe that the wait time for regulatory approval has doubled, with the average process now expected to take up to a year. They also voiced fears the holdup could impact the development of the UK's fintech community, which the UK government promised to support just months ago. Among those affected is someone named Jack, the head of that's not their real name, the head of compliance at a London fintech, who's asked for his real name to be kept private. His company submitted an e-money institute, which is called an EMI application, to the FCA 9 months ago, but still hasn't gotten a response about the status or quality of the application. It took 5 months to even get a caseworker who he says has been largely unresponsive and has given little guidance. The caseworker has only come back and asked a few questions. Every email says they're doing background checks, but there are no substantive questions. And it shouldn't take you 3 months to tell us you're missing documents. The communication is shit, he says. Getting licensed. Yeah.
Sorry, Tyler. This is a great example of like the two-speed business world in the UK, right? One speed is like, you've got the task force doing the central bank digital currencies. You've got this whole push for fintech, tech nation, a big kind of like tech stream, and then you got this. Then it butts up against this like government historical FCA regulator like paper driven thing. It's just like a great example of where, because of this disconnect, pace will be slowed down. So I think I don't know. It's a great one of they need to do the intervention to make it accelerate massively, right?
That's provided, Dave, that this is all true, because remember that Sifted is also the author of an article saying that if there's one unhappy employee at Gorillas, then they will never be a big business. So I don't even know if this is really a big.
Then they will never be what? What did you say?
She brings up a great point. There was an article 2 weeks ago how it was even this publication, if I recall correctly, Sifted, who
they don't have trust in Sifted as a quality publication.
Right. So basically, tech journalists are rather fond of pointing out when the world's fastest growing startups, like Gorillas out of Berlin, is having hiccups and not. They're dropping the ball. They're not executing exactly right. They're not dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. And so this is a sign that, of their imminent demise. And, and then here's an example of a government agency, the FCA, having similar inability to function perfectly and not, they're not even responding to emails. And so why aren't the tech journalists covering the FCA in the same way that they cover Gorillas and point out that this FCA agency is in dire straits and is going to fall apart and is hanging on by a thread? Interesting thought. So
yeah. So like the trust in the publication and it does though. On this one, though, I just think there's a global theme going on, right? Which is like, because everything's powering ahead in the tech world, but it's always going to butt up against this regulation thing. I would have more solace in understanding that like the FCA would be full of like paper-based long processes, and they've probably been hit with like 10 times the demand through. So I do see the thread of truth in this argument, but I love the way that we qualify the journalistic like credibility, because it makes the last point, Tyler, is it kind of makes me think of like when we read that one of the golden age of VC is over. Not quite, right?
Yeah. So it says insiders say the FCA is burdened by bureaucratic fatigue, which is adding to fintech's troubles. According to one senior industry expert who works closely with the FCA, the organization has struggled to keep and motivate its personnel in recent years. The turnover in staff there is extraordinary. There's a lot of absenteeism. It's a very strange culture. Morale is low there, the official said. With the single exception of the communications team, nobody puts their phone number in their email. Moreover, the FCA shrunk last year after making over 100 members of its team eligible for voluntary redundancy. Yet it's not just management issues and high staff turnover. The FCA has also been bogged down by Brexit changes and the pandemic. It had to divert a lot of resources to issuing and analyzing the industry surveys when the UK locked down. It's taken a lot of people from authorization teams.
Right. So cut the head count in half and then like 10x the demand. I mean, that is a perfect storm, right?
They should have just called this article huge burnout of the FCA. And
right.
Because it seems like that's the article about like how people are burned out and don't want to work there anymore.
Yeah.
And hence the public is suffering.
Yeah, I suspect that a policy decision was made because they did not want many independent entities doing this kind of thing, but they couldn't block it directly, so just
stall.
death of 1,000 paper cuts.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's not so different from that last article about the SEC, playing crazy games with Coinbase and not only delaying with them, but saying they're going to sue them if they come out. And it could be that the banks have some control and influence with these governments and their agencies in preventing the uprise of their future opponents who potentially...
There you go. That's a brilliant thread, Tyler, and it kind of reminds me of the whole, like, there's this debate is raging, or this war is raging in the old world versus new world, and then the second war that's raging is the whole, like, those bad cryptocurrency people and the central bank digital currencies. That is a brilliant thread.
So the next one's from Katerina about quantum computing breakthrough, entanglement of 3-spin qubits achieved in silicon. From SciTech Daily, a 3-qubit entangled state has been realized in a fully controllable array of spin qubits in silicon. So this is a quantum computing, which is a very difficult thing to do. We're seeing quantum computing breakthrough headlines on a at least weekly basis now, usually 2 or 3 a week. So very encouraging indeed. If this
when the audience hears quantum, and Jen and I were in a conversation about this, it's really just kind of understanding what quantum means. Physics works for everything from small particles all the way up to the largest objects, Newtonian physics, meaning gravity, mass, stuff like that. But when you start moving into the small, that's when physics starts breaking down and you get into quantum. And so when they talk about quantum, they're really talking about the very small. I'm sorry to kind of throw this nerd talk out.
And by the way, Chris,
when they talk about entanglement is the property where these subatomic particles can basically be connected. So when people tell you there's the theory of a parallel universe where there's a copy of Tyler that's doing exactly what you're doing, that's the theory behind quantum entanglement. It's true communication essentially through the universe with no detectable, medium. And I'll shut up now.
So I just found your article, Chris, that McDonald's is accepting Bitcoin in El Salvador. And it turns out in reality, they don't have a choice, because now that it's legal tender, the president has said everybody, even the little lady selling bananas on the street corner, has to accept Bitcoin, even if she doesn't want to, because it's a legal tender. She can convert it from Bitcoin into out of Bitcoin immediately after the transaction if she wants to. And that's what that government fund is for. But everybody has to accept Bitcoin. So the headline that McDonald's is now accepting Bitcoin in El Salvador, well, everybody's accepting Bitcoin in El Salvador. So that's a kind of a misguided headline, but worth noting that everybody's in El Salvador has Bitcoin, even all the companies, whether they want to or not. Katerina sends in this one from that genetic analysis illuminates origins of lung cancer in people with no history of smoking. A genomic analysis of lung cancer in people with no history of smoking has found that a majority of these tumors arise from the accumulations of mutations in their DNA. And now when you do a genetic analysis of their DNA, you can see, oh, here's why you had lung cancer. You had a mutation in your gene. And on this point, mini CRISPR genetic editing system has now been engineered, easier to deliver into human cells for gene therapies. Bioengineers have repurposed a non-working CRISPR system to make a smaller version of the genome engineering tool, and progress is going to happen. Geeks are going to geek, and innovations are going to innovate, and CRISPR is going to get cheaper and easier and smaller, and cheaper and easier and smaller, and cheaper and easier and smaller for the foreseeable future, until somebody actually makes a real smallpox virus that wipes us all out, and that's coming. So stay tuned for that headline, which is due to happen any day. And by the way, we read a headline yesterday that a state in southern India is struggling with a virus now for the third time in about 5 years, that nearly every single person who gets it dies. And I can't recall the name of the virus, but it's got the southern India state really concerned.
It's like Nika or Pika or something.
It was quite a weird name, yeah.
I think it was a little boy that died too.
Right.
It's called Nipah virus.
Yeah. So heaven forbid somebody genetically engineers that bad boy to be airborne, and then we're all toast.
You know it's a big news because people on the streets are already talking about it.
Yeah, and then you have the Mu variation is now in only 49 of the United States, basically all of them. So, fuck masks. You know what I mean? Just forget it. Let's just start over. Everyone get the Mika virus out of India and let that thing go airborne. Oh boy. We're not going.
A virologist pointed out that wherever they've coexisted, at least so far, Mu and Delta, Mu doesn't outcompete Delta. It's the other way around.
Oh, interesting.
That's good.
Pegasus is trending in Germany. We covered that one from Willie. Thank you. And the Russian space chief invites Elon Musk to his home. I've already set the tea kettle, he says. From CNN, Russia's space chief was watching as billionaire Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson blasted into space aboard vehicles they helped fund, and wishing Russian oligarchs would follow suit. Our millionaires prefer to invest more in yachts than in spacecrafts. The head of...
This is a coded threat, man. Remember, Navalny drank some tea.
Yeah, I like what your people are doing. People who spend their money on useful things for overall society, he says. But he saves his highest praise for SpaceX founder Elon Musk and blames his own country's stagnation in space on the instability that followed the collapse of the Soviet Union. Mr. Elon Musk realizes many of the ideas and thoughts that we wanted to realize but did not get to because after the breakup of the Soviet Union, our space program halted for some time. We respect him as an organizer of the space industry and as an innovator who is not afraid to take risk. And he is inviting Elon Musk to his home in Russia to be a guest of my family and discuss exploring the universe, extraterrestrial life, and how we can use space to preserve life on Earth. I already set the tea kettle on heat, he says. So I think he's trying to get out of Russia. I think he wants to go work at SpaceX. So the next one is from Demolaire about Sequoia, Stripe, and others invest $200 million in an African fintech called Wave, which is now at $1.7 billion valuation, making it Africa's newest unicorn, yet another African fintech unicorn. It's about once a month now. And Tencent draws a line. This is an interesting one from South China Morning Post. So thank you to Ngini for this one. South China Morning Post out of China reporting Tencent, which is the biggest tech company in China, is the maker of WeChat, the biggest app in China. It's called a super app. It does everything. It does Uber. It does Tinder. You can buy a house. You can cut carrots. You can do anything you could ever think to do, you can do in WeChat, including pay for things. It's the main way people pay for things. That's why Tencent's the biggest. We call it the biggest tech company in China. Now, Tencent, the headline reads from South China Morning Post, Tencent draws a clearer line between international and Chinese WeChat users. Tencent is asking Chinese WeChat users to switch to overseas accounts if they use an international phone number as Beijing cracks down on domestic data. Kind of echoing a point that we made earlier about TikTok and how it's used in China and outside of China. As there's going to be different rules for inside and outside of China, makes sense. But this is an interesting point indeed about how China treats its apps differently if it's internal and external. It has to, because it's separate internets. The internet inside of China is quite different from the internet outside of China. But that's a really interesting article that I just tweeted out to the Tech News Twitter account, TNATW. Thank you, and Jeannie, for that one. The next one's from Evan from NBC News. And it's an opinion piece, and the headline reads, "Unleash the robots and save the economy. Calls for steps like robot taxes to level the playing field between humans and AI will only hurt the economy and workers." Well, they are replacing lots of human jobs at the moment. The next one is from The Economist, and this is a doozy. And it says a British historian named Neil Ferguson on why the end of America's empire won't be peaceful. As it leaves Afghanistan in chaos, America's decline mirrors Britain's decline centuries ago. It may also invite wider conflict, warns a historian, Neil Ferguson. It says the multitude, Britain's state of mind was the product of a combination. It's a very unfriendly article to read. And it's very long indeed. So I just tweeted out that one. At the end of the article, he says, America today has a similar problem to what the UK had. A relative decline in economic output on the basis of purchasing power parity, which allows for the lower prices of many Chinese domestic goods. The GDP of China caught up with that of America in 2014. The American economy is still bigger, but the gap is projected to narrow. It is no secret that China poses a bigger economic challenge than the Soviet Union once did, since the latter's economy was never more than 44% the size of America during the Cold War. American sentiment towards the Chinese government has markedly soured in the past 5 years, but that does not seem to be translating into public interest in actively countering the Chinese military threat. If Beijing invades Taiwan, most Americans will probably echo the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, who notoriously described the German bid to carve up Czechoslovakia in 1938 as a quarrel in a faraway country between people whom we know nothing. I have to disagree. America is very interested in what's happening on Taiwan because we're dependent on their chips. Britain was not dependent on Czechoslovakian semiconductors for their car industry, you dipshit. What an idiot this dude is. Holy cow. Economist. Neil, do some history homework. You can't compare England's lack of dependence on Czechoslovakia with America's dependent on semiconductors out of Taiwan. Do you know what a semiconductor is, Neil? Do you understand it runs our cars, Neil? And that's our industry, our car industry. Neil, do you understand these fundamental differences, Neil? No. Please get into tech, Neil, and check out this thing called semiconductors. We're incredibly interested in Taiwan. And that's why all of the navies of the fucking world are there right now, Neil. Did you know that, Neil? Do you know what a satellite is? Do you know what satellite imagery is? If you look at the satellite imagery, you would know that all of the navies in the world are surrounding Taiwan right now precisely for this reason, Neil. It's called semiconductors. Check it out, Neil. Join Tech News around the world and stop embarrassing yourself in The Economist. The next one is from Wired. It says, this drone sniffs out odors with a real moth antenna. Researchers slap a living antenna on a drone to give the machine an insanely keen sense of smell. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the smellicopter. Is the headline. And it's about the size of a moth. And it has actual moth odor detectors and to sniff out odors. I'm tweeting this out right now. I want to know what it can smell. It's a moth, it's a plane, it's a smellicopter. It's a tiny drone that senses odors with an onboard moth antenna. Seriously, that's the scientist's real name of the creation. The smellicopter, a system that monitors the electrical signals sent from the antenna of an actual moth, allowing the drone to lock onto a source of a scent and navigate toward it. And seriously, this has a long-term purpose, to one day get drones equipped with moth antenna to sniff out objects like bombs. It's all thanks to the sacrifice of the hawk moth, which is an extremely sensitive smeller like other moths. When the moth picks up a scent like that of a flower or a potential mate, the odors bind to the proteins inside the antenna, and these proteins in turn activate neurons dedicated to specific chemicals. That means the antenna are producing electrical signals that researchers can tap into. In order to create a sort of moth drone cyborg, the mechanical engineers at University of Washington cold anesthetized a hawk moth in a freezer before removing its antennas, then cut both ends off a single antenna and attached each of the itty-bitty wire hooked up to an electrical circuit, a lot like a heart monitor, which measures the electrical voltage that is produced by the heart when it beats. We measure the electrical signal produced by the antenna when it smells odor. And very similarly, the antenna will produce these spike-shaped pulses in response to patches of odor. So it works. It's a smello. It's a what? A smellocopter.
That's going to be extremely
what is the practical use for this?
What?
I was just thinking that'd be very useful at airports and security checkpoints in general.
Oh yes, or to look for dead bodies.
No, they say
in the jungle?
They say for bombs, Cheryl.
For bomb.
Yes.
Smell bombs.
Yes.
See. I know. I think many people like to smuggle food, right, in their suitcase.
Oh, you could definitely find durian in the Asian airports. All the Chinese folks trying to smuggle durian out of Thailand back to
oh man,
China.
I have a story about that. My grandma was
everyone in Asia has a durian story.
Oh my God! Every time
Look,
they come through customs.
My resort has a 10,000 baht fine for smoking and durian in the villas.
Yes.
I
It's
love
about
that those two
$320,
are
but
equivalent.
still, yeah.
And Cheryl's suggestion of bodies isn't completely ridiculous. What about in like building collapses and whatnot, where you're trying to find survivors?
Search and rescue.
Yeah, search and rescue. That could be really useful. I mean, I know we use dogs, but they have a size issue. Obviously, they can't get into places.
There's those flies that find corpses really fast. They'd probably try to do that at some point too, right?
Well, you could just follow the flies. You could build a drone that just follows flies. That could be interesting. The New York Times is the next one. OnlyFans is not a safe platform for safe work. It's a pimp. The company's decision to reverse course on a proposed ban of sexually explicit content shows the power of pornography. They're just tweeting that one out from the New York Times. The next one from Edwin in the audience. The headline reads, after Dutch DPA, the Netherlands-based nonprofit hits TikTok with a $6 billion class action suit. It says, after the Dutch Privacy Authority failed to make a clear statement towards TikTok, Dutch parents take over with a class action lawsuit for $6 billion. Wow. So Dutch parents are suing TikTok for $6 billion in a class action lawsuit. The Netherlands-based non-profit hits TikTok. Wow. I guess because
no wonder they are now looking for a bank loan of $6 billion.
Oh, TikTok is?
Yeah, I tweeted out. You can look at it later.
Oh, interesting.
Really? You can't make this up.
Wow.
Yeah, because sorry.
Oh, it says Netherlands-based stitching. Some company, it's a Dutch word I can't pronounce, a non-profit organization that defends the rights of consumers has filed a lawsuit against Chinese social video app TikTok, demanding that it compensate 4.5 million Dutch users for illegally harvesting and auctioning sensitive user data. The foundation says TikTok is violating a large number of laws and regulations with its actions and asked the court in Amsterdam to order the company to pay damages to the tune of $6 billion. The foundation, so 4.5 million Dutch users for $6 billion. What's the math on that? About $1,250 each, roughly, or pounds rather, euros rather.
I just DM you, Tyler.
Yeah, the foundation claiming. Yeah. Oh, here it is. A new headline just now that Cheryl just found from the information. It says, ByteDance, which is TikTok's parent company, in talks to borrow up to $5 billion to fund overseas expansion. TikTok owner ByteDance is in talks with banks to borrow up to $5 billion in a syndicated loan to refinance debt and pay for overseas expansion. people with knowledge of the matter said. As the path to an initial public offering appears unlikely this year, ByteDance plans to use more than half of the money to refinance its existing debt to take advantage of current low interest rates while spending the rest of its operations in the US, Europe, Latin America, and other parts of the world where it needs to keep spending on growing headcount, marketing, and computing power, the people said. The company and the banks have discussed raising between $4 billion and $5 billion, but the exact size of the loan hasn't yet been finalized as the debt financing talks are still ongoing. Well, I wonder if they're going to see the headline about the Netherlands suing them for $6 billion. And I imagine...
Make that 11.
I imagine they won't get the loan they're looking for as soon as the banks they're talking to realize the real reason why they're raising this $5 billion. Or borrowing this $5 billion. Oh, TikTok, what are you doing? Oh man, they were hoping to get the $5 billion before this became public about this Dutch.
You gotta play the General Lee.
They gotta run TikTok, run. You got to get out of the Netherlands as fast as you can, and you got to pay all of the journalists there not to leak this story. Oh boy, you're in deep shit, TikTok.
I think pretty much every tech company would be sued by that standard, right? I mean, I sometimes get crazy how many apps just keep on like stealing my data. I don't even know that I consented. You know how Facebook took mined millions and millions and billions and maybe even trillions of private data, really, when they started the news feed and this and that. I don't remember consenting for all those things. So
here's what it says. It says, as per the current lawsuit, the information provided by TikTok to Dutch users, many of whom are children, when installing and using the app was in English and thus not readily understandable. By not offering their privacy statements in Dutch, TikTok failed to provide enough explanation of how the app collects, processes, and uses personal data. We are particularly concerned about TikTok's collection of often very personal information. It is not about what information you share with them, but how much time you spend watching the videos on the platform. Its algorithm keeps track of every second you watch in order to present you with videos that keep you glued to the app as long as possible or lure you into virtual transactions. Not only young people, but also young adults are sensitive to this. The lawsuit's being financed by whoever. Interesting detail that it was not done in English in the Netherlands, or wasn't done in Dutch. But wow, that's going to be an interesting lawsuit because TikTok's going to say, but the Dutch are the best English speakers in the world, other than Sweden, outside of England and the US. And then the Dutch, they'll say, well, kids don't start learning English until they're 14 in school or whatever. It's going to be interesting. $6 billion. Ouch. And now they're trying to get a loan. What a funny two headlines coming out simultaneously. The next one is from Evan from Politico about the Lockheed Martin's super secret weapons facility. And there was also a new jet that was seen over the Philippines, which might be Lockheed Martin as well. A really wild new stealth jet. And some interest from folks from the Philippines caught little glimpses of it. And then China's announcing that they have new technologies that make stealth fighters kind of no longer, kind of defeats all of the stealthiness of stealth fighters. So then this one comes in from Ted Abramson from The Guardian, that the 20 meat and dairy firms emit more greenhouse gases than Germany, Britain, or France. Livestock companies with large emissions receive billions of dollars in funding, and they emit more than Germany, Britain, or France. That's a lot of emissions. And then Evan sends in this one, that using AI, scientists develop a device to detect autism. These results pave the way for a tool for early detection of autistic disorder using AIs, using body mechanics, how the individual moves physically through a camera. And Amgent sends in this one, that Facebook or Twitter posts can now be quietly modified by the government under new surveillance laws. That's the headline. Sweeping police powers for online surveillance and hacking raise concerns over privacy and security. A new law gives Australia, this is the one in Australia that we covered a week ago, that Australia police now do have unprecedented powers for online surveillance, data interception, and altering data. Yep, that passed. And now other people are starting to hear about it as well. But we covered that when it broke last week. And Verdane sends in this one from India today, that Tesla is in talks with the Indian government to set up a fully owned retail outlets in India. US-based electronic car maker Tesla is in talks with the government to explore procedures for setting up fully owned retail outlets in India. And then David Craze sends in this one from Nature about personalized profiles for disease risk. Must capture all facets of health. And this is a really interesting point, because we're very soon going to get into the genetics of things, and they'll use genetics to create personalized profiles of disease risk. And they'll see that genetically, Chris is disproportionately have a gene that makes them likely to get, colon cancer. Yet, that will be used by all the insurance tech companies, no doubt. However, there are other risk factors, like what city you live in and the pollution in that area, and all kinds of data that create a risk profile for all kinds of diseases, not to mention your diet and your exercise and your work habits and your sleeping habits. And my God, all of these things play into whether or not these genes get expressed. So the headline from Nature is quite correct. Personalized profiles for disease risk must capture all facets of health, because if you only go by the genes, that's not really fair. I think people would agree. So interesting point.
Just to clarify that a little bit, it works both ways, as in there's more than the genes which can create these situations, but also the way that you act and the lifestyle that you live can mitigate it. So I may have an increased genetically, a far increased chance of obesity or heart disease, for instance, which will affect my premiums. But the way that I live my life and the area that I'm in and the job that I have and how active I am completely mitigates that. So it works both ways. It can increase risk or decrease, to your point.
So NASA's Perseverance rover collects first Mars rock samples. Can't wait to get those back on Earth. It'll be the first time any bit of Mars is on Earth. That'll be interesting to see the analysis on that. And then Tesla's full self-driving beta software has been leaked. Tesla's full self-driving beta software has leaked, and it's being passed around in the Tesla hacking community. Fortunately, it's not for any nefarious reason. As of now, the Tesla's full self-driving beta software is only being tested internally and is part of the automaker's early access program, which includes some Tesla customers. It allows the driver to enter a location into the navigation system. The vehicle will attempt to drive itself to the location with constant supervision by the driver, who remains responsible and needs to be ready to take control at all times. Elon Musk has been promising a wider release to Tesla owners in the US who purchased the full self-driving package, but the release has been delayed several times. Recently, he said it would be by the end of September. Tesla's approach to releasing full self-driving has been criticized by many. Anyway, it's been leaked. Root access with Linux-based systems. It says sources familiar with the matter say that the binary firmware files of Tesla's full self-driving beta have leaked, and they are being passed around in the Tesla root access community. Root access, like Tesla's operating system, generally refer to being able to log into some root account on another server, or being able to run commands as a root on the server. Some hackers who have Tesla vehicles have been known to use root access to look through Tesla's software updates and even activate unreleased or dormant features. Within that community, it has been known that the Full Self-Driving beta firmware has been going around for a while, and with root access, you can actually run it in your vehicle. So, next one up, Flipkart, which is one of the big e-commerce companies out of India. But Flipkart's founder files to launch vehicle to invest in Vanguard ETF. Okay, you can do that. And Diwa, who's in the Philippines, says that McDonald's breakfast bought with Bitcoins in El Salvador. Yeah, people are now this morning waking up on September 7th and buying their McDonald's breakfast with Bitcoins and taking photos of it and sharing those out. What else do we have here?
I was gonna bring up one interesting point about that. It's gonna be interesting when Bitcoin fluctuates and you have something and you buy it and you return it and it's actually you make money off of it.
Okay, so just a few more here. We've got from Manaz from the Wall Street Journal, Sinopharm COVID vaccine seen as less effective in Bahrain study. Well, there you go. Yet another study of Sinopharm and Sinovac not really working the way they should. Thailand, don't get me started on the big news item in Thailand today. Oh my God. Amazon and Mitsubishi to set up 450 solar power plants in Japan. Tech giant ties up with trading house to secure electricity for data centers. Solar powered data centers. Fantastic. From Nikkei Japan. Thank you for that one, BB. And then you've got this one from Cell.com. The composition of gut microbiota following early life antibiotic exposure affects host health and longevity in later life. Oh, that's fantastic. So if you have too much exposure to antibiotics, it will affect the composition of your gut microbiome later in life. They exposed mice to antibiotics in early life and then monitor these mice for more than 700 days. And avoid antibiotics as you were warned as a child. Don't take it at the first, sign of something wrong. You have to be very careful and limit your exposure to antibiotics because it wipes out your gut biome, which could.
But isn't it normal that when you take antibiotics, your physician always recommends you to take additional like microbiota tablets or drink
probiotics?
Yeah,
I've not heard that in the U.S. growing up.
Really? In Poland, this is
Yeah,
the
that's what
number
they
one
tell
thing.
us here.
They first prescribe you probiotics and then they give you the antibiotics because they say that you cannot actually take antibiotics back home unless you're like eating yogurt, eating kefir, or putting like anything whatever synthesized.
Yeah.
But your biome comes back. But what Tyler is showing that long-term effect, or not Tyler, but the article's long-term effects is that your biome is reduced. Is that right, Tyler?
I'm just tweeting out the article now, so you can have a real good.
And Asif,
I think it might, but it also might be, you might really destroy it to a point where not all of the microbiota can be restored.
It's the staging of the restoration. What happens is the yeast takes off, and you get what's called thrush, because the yeast is the most efficient microbiotic. Actually, let me qualify that statement. It's one of the more efficient. So what happens is, this happened to me. I had a really bad stomach issue. They hit me with a bunch of antibiotics, and then I spent months dealing with the yeast because your body starts getting overrun with yeast, and you get this condition called thrush. And so it's important to stage the antibiotics and the effect on your belly and stuff.
In Japan, we like to take food enzyme too for our
Natto na.
drink kombucha. Natto だけじゃない. So fermentation and food enzyme. Yeah.
So the next one and last one from BB from the Wall Street Journal, that virtual reality puts drug researchers inside the molecules they study. An immersive technology, VR, reveals clues about how compounds might work with the aim of speeding up the drug discovery process. So you can get right down to the molecular level of the bindings of the atoms in the molecules to up close, and you can see a photo of this that I'm just tweeting out. So thank you to BB. It takes us to the top of the hour, and I have another appointment to attend to now at the top of the hour. So a sincere thank you to everybody for another Tech News Around the World. We'll see you next time.